Hello, I'm Graeme Park, and in this session, I'll be talking to a scriptwriter who's written for many TV shows, including Ackley Bridge, Call the Midwife, Midsummer Murders, New Tricks, Waterloo Road, Emmerdale, and more. Please welcome Lisa Holdsworth. Hello, Lisa.
Hi there, how you doing?
Very well, thank you very much for joining us today and talking to an online audience of students from Glyndwr University. Now, before we talk about your successful career as a scriptwriter and where you are now, can you tell us a bit about how you got to where you are today? Tell us a bit about your background and your journey to being a scriptwriter.
Sure, so I'm Leeds born and bred. In fact, that's where I am right now, in the attic of my house. I went to a pretty ordinary comprehensive school, and nobody in my family had worked in the media before, but actually they're a pretty creative family. Mum's one of seven and they all paint and cook and all that kind of stuff. I think if they'd had the same opportunities as me, they'd possibly be doing something similar to me. But I had a very supportive family who never once said, do you want to stop thinking about all this drama rubbish and go off and get a proper job? So for a little while I thought I wanted to be an actor. But whilst I was doing my A-levels, I realised there's a lot of being told what to do as an actor, and that was never going to fly for me. So writing became the thing, and I pretty much realised now, I think writers are born, not made. And I've been writing from an early age. I was an inveterate liar as a child, so I just get paid for it now.
So you say that actors, you don't like being told. Actors just get told what to do. Did you try your hand at acting?
I did, yeah. In my third studies A-level, we did a lot of productions and on stage, and I enjoy it, and I still like it. If we're at a script read through and there's an actor absent, I will be the first person to put my hand up and say, oh, I'll read in, because I wasn't bad at it, but I wasn't great at it, and I think also that to be an actor, you've got to be so thick-skinned and so up for getting rejection after rejection after rejection. There's a lot of that in writing, but I can go away and rewrite, whereas actors, once the audition's done, that's done. There's very little negotiation. And I don't think I was robust enough for it. Some of my best friends are actors, but and they are enormously resilient. I think writers are resilient, but actors, particularly in the last 12 months, have just had the worst of it. So it's been a tough time. So yeah, it just wasn't for me. So I went off to university down in London. The only time I've lived outside of Leeds is 3 years at the University in North London. It was a purely academic degree. It was critical theory, looking at old films and picking them to pieces, and a theatre study. So it was a major in film and a minor in theatre. Never picked up a camera, never stood on a stage, never did any directing. It was all theoretical. And I think that started to get to me towards the end. So when I should have been writing my dissertation, which I did get round to writing in the end, I wrote a script called Jackie's Wedding. And it was a screenplay, and I'd written bits and pieces before, but this was the first full-length thing that was all from me, and I got to the end of it. And at the end of my degree, I came back to Leeds, and everybody said, oh, you won't work in TV, you've got to be in London, which is utter rubbish. In fact, it's more rubbish than it ever has been. And the fact is, Yorkshire Television was a significant power at the time, still is to a degree, and there's been a lot of changes since then. Came back up to Leeds, took a job in factual television, because my theory is if you can't get the job you want, get the job adjacent to the job you want, because you never know who you'll meet. And it proved to be true, because after 4 years of being a production coordinator, I built props, did the shopping, booked the hotels, signed the insurance forms, all that. It was a really, really good apprenticeship in production. I think I have an understanding of production that a lot of writers don't get to have. I shoved my script in front of the nose of Kay Mellor via her son-in-law, who I was working with at the time. And Kay has written all sorts of shows, but I mean, I think at the time she would have been the Sally Wainwright, the level that Sally Wainwright's at now. So she'd just written the first series of Fat Friends. It had been massive, got 10 million on ITV, which for a non-crime show is very unusual on ITV. And she was about to start the second series. I was taken on as a personal assistant, which was pretty much doing what I'd been doing before, the dog's body jobs, but I also got to read scripts. And when she decided to make the second series of Fat Friends, we had a big storyline session where you just chucked things in. And as the name suggests, Fat Friends was about a Weight Watchers class, basically. And I chucked in some of my personal experiences of being on the larger size, particularly as a child, and being bullied. And she did what any self-respecting writer should do, which is wrote them all down. And so we knew at the end of that session that there was an episode missing. Mira Sayal wasn't going to be able to come back to do the second series, so they needed a new character to go in that slot. So I went home that weekend and wrote a treatment for the episode based on what I'd been telling Kay on spec. Didn't know whether she was going to be interested in it. Came back into work on Monday morning and popped it on a desk and said, oh, I've just written that. I don't know whether it's any good for you. Just have a read of it, see what you think. And by the end of that week, I had my first TV writing commission.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
But were you asked to write a treatment, or did you just take it on yourself to do it?
I just took it on. I decided that weekend I had a story to tell on it, and this was my moment, and I seized it.
So there was a chance that you could have been told, oh no, sorry, we've already decided what we're going to do. Well, no, that's really good. I also like your story about getting the job. If you can't get the job, you want the job adjacent to the job. So as you said, you must have learned a lot about how TV works.
Absolutely. Well, I went on shoots. I mean, even though it was factual, we made science and history programs.
No problem.
I got a really great understanding of why it takes so long to film something, that everything's shot from many angles, the permissions you need, the clearances you need. And I think having that practical understanding of the reality of standing in the rain and filming something, because it's a position that writers don't often find themselves in. It gives you a respect for the team that you're working with, and television is a enormously collaborative process. So there's really not room. I mean, there are some prima donnas, but there's really not room for it, especially on the high volume shows. There just isn't time for your artistic vision. And so if you've envisaged, this enormously expensive sequence that'll take 4 days to film when you've actually only got a 5-day schedule, shut up about it and get on with it. Just you have to have that respect, especially in the last 12 months. The crews that are on the ground, masked up in their PPE, getting tested every 2 days, whereas I've been sat in a centrally heated attic space, relatively comfortable. You have to have that respect for everybody.
So would you say your time working on TV shoots, even though they're not they weren't fiction, they were like, some of them were factual, has that influenced how you write for television?
Yeah, I think understanding what can be achieved, it goes both ways, which is sometimes you cut your cloth to suit. You go, I know that it's tight on this. I know it'll be expensive to get a rain machine in, but sometimes you can negotiate, and particularly this year, because I've been a producer as well as a writer on Discovery of Witches, being able to say, look, if I cut this in episode 2, can we achieve this in episode 3? It's always a balance of money. Time is of the essence. How much time do you have an actor on set? So you talk about, well, if I cannot achieve this in the story with this actor because they're back to LA at the end of the week, I'll do it with another actor. And that flexibility that it gives you, you must be adaptable, because Netflix, I had a meeting with Netflix a couple of weeks ago, and their motto is, our business model is change. It's the business model for television. Everybody's business model is change. Look at the announcement today that BBC Three is coming back. That is a game changer. Again, even though taking it off the air 6 years ago was a game changer as well. It always will change. So if you become stagnant and set in your ways and only write in one way, the industry will pass you by. So learning flexibility is a really important thing.
Yeah, and I suppose you say you've been doing some producing as well. It's all about transferable skills, isn't it? What you learn from one thing and applying it to different areas. Why screenwriting though? Did you decide I want to be a writer, or did you actually say I want to be a screenwriter?
It was always for the screen. I've been a television obsessive from a very early age. from the first series of Fame, which your students
Oh,
will be fantastic to remember. I'm
remember
rewatching it at the moment for something I'm writing for a company in Leeds, and it's wow, I know all the words to the songs. It's
Did you have Did you wear leg warmers as well?
Yes, but the fat girls can't wear leg warmers. They just make you look like an elephant. So my mum knitted me some. We couldn't afford to buy any, so they were knitted.
So you always knew you wanted to be. You always knew you wanted to be a screenwriter. Going back to talking about rain machines and how you see a scene working and how you can change actors if someone's going back to LA, etc., etc. What about directors? What if a director really does not see your vision for the scene? Do you have to work with directors?
So that's where the skill of writing comes in. The point of that document, that script, it's not just for the actors, it's for everybody working on the production. You are selling your vision. So particularly the director who's pulling all that together, he's talking to the heads of department, or she as well, the heads of department in wardrobe, in special effects, and the actors, and the casting director even. If he or she is not seeing it jump off the page and you're not doing your job right, the purpose of that document is to communicate everything that you want to see ending up on screen. And it's been lovely on Discovery, which has had two directors across 3 blocks, and being able to sit down and have a conversation with them and talk things through. And it's been a very collaborative process. So Jamie, the director on some of our big action sequences, has written a long list of shots that he wants to put in, the feel he wants, and we've pushed back on some things, and some things we've gone, well, that's brilliant, let's just cut and paste it into the script. So yeah, working with the director is really important, because if you don't have a good relationship with your director, the first time you see the rushes, you're going to go, well, that was not what I had in mind at all. And that is a very, very frustrating experience.
So it sounds like you're very hands-on with when you present a script and it gets approved and goes into production. It sounds like you're very hands-on with what comes out at the very end. Is that very important to you?
It is at this stage of my career. So early in your career, it's less so. So the thing I would say to writers building their career is, don't go for do go for the money. It would be stupid as the chair of the Writers Guild not to say don't get paid. Don't go for the money, go for the control. And there are things in your contract that you can have put in that means I get to see edits, I get first refusal on what episodes I want to write on, things I'm developing, that kind of thing. And it's all about getting your vision up on the screen. And that sounds like a wanky thing to say, but it's the truth. The less experience, the more at the bottom of the ladder you are, there'll be times when you don't even meet your director. As particularly on the soaps, they'll just say, Fred's directing your week, and you'll get a few notes via the script editor, but that's it. But as you progress in your career, you will have more and more contact with the people who will be visualizing your words.
But obviously, if you get gain respect and people want you to work because of the quality of what you do, then that means you're in a stronger position to make those. Well, I was going to say not demands, to make those requests. I suppose that's a better way of putting it.
It's getting listened to. So it's making sure people know that, like I say, you're not a prima donna, that when you ask for something, it's because you know it'll work, it'll look great on screen, that you're not a glory seeker looking for the big stunt or something like that, that you care about the narrative as a whole. And the further you get on your career, the more you've proved that with your track record is up there to be seen.
I suppose it's just being passionate and believing in your own work, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, you've got to have, and it's really hard at the start. The real belief that I know I'm right about this. So the advice I give to fairly new writers is pick your battles. Don't argue over every comma, full stop, change of word, etc. If you do that, and I've worked with writers who are like that, you will get a terrible reputation, deservedly so, because you're holding things up. But when you know in your heart of hearts, and it's usually over something that a character would do, there's often a discussion about, I don't believe that character would do this in this moment, motivation, that kind of thing. When in your heart of hearts you know that the decision is wrong, fighting again, you've kept your powder dry, and so if you are speaking up in that moment, they will listen to you. But if you've complained over the title of the episode, then you won't get listened to.
You mentioned characters. And that's what TV drama is all about. It's about, well, it's about a number of things, but the characters are one of the reasons why people get drawn in. Now, if you're writing an original script, you create the characters, you develop the characters. They're your characters. But how different is it, and how do you approach writing an episode for a show that's already got established characters? For example, Waterloo Road, right? What's the difference in the two processes?
It's one of the big skills of television writing, and it's what delineates us from, I would say, playwriting and film writing, because yes, you are often playing with someone else's dolls. And you have to open your ears, you have to listen. So the first show I went on to after Fat Friends was Emmerdale. That had a cast of 50 odd at the time. I think it's in its 70. I think it's got 70 regular characters now. And you have to watch the show, internalize it, notice the quirks, notice, take on board the age, the class, the nationality, the background of those characters, and make sure you sort of breathe it in. And when I'm sat at my desk, I read the dialogue out to myself. So I do a pretty good impression of Marlon out of Emmerdale, and Paddy and all the rest of them, the characters I used to. It makes a long time since I've worked on Emmerdale. But yeah, you have to listen to it and listen to it. It's the dialogue where they live. So you'll have lots of discussions about, would Marlon do this? Would Paddy do this? Is this a realistic journey for this character? That is done collaboratively. But when you're writing the script, it's just you. And I've seen writers sacked off shows because they can't hear the voices. They just don't get it. And it's interesting when you see, every now and then you see something on television, you go, oh, that writer does not understand that show at all. And you've got to be passionate for yourself. So with the 3 years I wrote Emmerdale, if you'd asked me what's the best show on television, I'd said it's Emmerdale Farm. Oh my God. It's you don't understand. It has levels. It's about this, it's about that. When I was on Midsummer Murders, that's the greatest show on television. You absolutely immerse yourself in the show. And the reality is, if you don't do that, it's a miserable experience working on a show.
I mean, I haven't watched Emmerdale for years. I do occasionally dip in. What period did you write for it? When were you writing for it?
I was... the big stunt week that I worked on was the Emma Gale, where we dropped half the pub on Marlon's wife and killed her. So I was there for that. I wrote a lot of the original Andy Robert Katie affair, all of that. So in fact, I had about 6 months where every time I got an episode, my A story was Andy Robert Katie, because I must have been good at it. But I didn't get the wedding, so I was quite annoyed by that. But yeah, so I liked the emotional stories where people are storming out of rooms, whereas there were other writers on the team who were great at the businessy stuff or the crime stuff or the caper stuff. I wrote a lot of Dingles as well.
Obviously, though, you come across as a proud Yorkshire lass. Were you a fan of Emmerdale anyway? And if so, how did it feel to be asked to write for them?
It was definitely the family soap. So I'd followed it for a long time, and that stood me in great stead because I was a very, very new, wet behind the ears writer when I went onto the team. So I did a month in the story office. The soaps have a story office, it's like a 9-to-5 job where you beat out the stories across the month. You know which actors are available, what time the sun comes up and the sun comes down, so you know what scenes need to be night and interior and all those kind of things. It's a technical and a creative job, and it's often an entry-level job for new writers. So I worked there for a month and beat out the stories for the next block, and then I came onto the writing team, which was a really great decision by Steve Frost, who was the producer of the show at the time, because it absolutely got me into how the whole system worked. And yeah, it was amazing coming on to that show and being able and knowing the show intimately. So once a month you have a massive story conference. All the writers come to Leeds, and the story team and the script editors and the producers, and you sit around a big table and you pitch stories for the next month, the next 3 months, Christmas 2022, all the rest of it. You put the big stories in. And knowing the history of the show is important, so that you're not pitching something that everybody goes, oh my God, we've heard this 1,000 times. And it's always useful when I go onto a show, I go, what's the story you don't want to hear pitched again? on Waterloo Road, on Ackley Bridge, all the rest of it. And it's always good to know. It's not a bad question to ask. It's probably a relief to the producer. So the one on Emmerdale was a sheep gets caught in a ditch, and Andy, or it'll be Monica now, whoever's the farmer in the show, injures themselves rescuing the sheep. And what you get back is, look, a sheep's worth about 15 pence to a farmer. He'd get his shotgun and put a bullet between his eyes, and we can't do that at 7 o'clock on ITV, so don't pitch that story.
Actually, on that subject, you say you can't do that at 7 o'clock on ITV. Have any of your storylines on any of your TV stuff ended up getting Ofcom problems, like people complaining about them? I'm thinking, because some of the stuff you've done, like Emmerdale's pre-Watershed, although some of the stuff, well, a lot of your stuff is post-Watershed, but 9 o'clock, of course, is the very start, so you can't be too gratuitous or outrageous at 9. Have you ever had any of your scripts get into trouble?
It's weird, funnily enough, that 7 o'clock slot, because I think it's still seen as an adult show, although a lot of kids do watch it. You can get away with, there's people jumping into bed with each other all the time. The two shows which I had pushback on were Robin Hood and Waterloo Road, because they're seen as youth shows.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a thing that Ofcom and editorial policy at the BBC, they have a whole department that look after this at the BBC, are very hot on its imitable behaviour. So if you show something in an episode of Ackley Bridge, you don't want the kids going out and doing it the next day. So on Robin Hood, it was integral to the plot. It wasn't gratuitous. We needed a threat of a hanging. And so the script went from literally had the noose over his neck to that came back, no, you can't do that. There'll be kids hanging their little brothers from trees all over the country. So then the noose was next. We could see the noose. They got really uncomfortable with that. That went. Then it was someone holding the rope. They weren't comfortable with that. I think it ended up with, we put the hood over his head, and the dialogue was, you'll be dead by hanging, but we didn't see the rope. And so that kept bouncing back. I did a gun siege in Waterloo Road, and the production company were famously gung-ho. It was the same company that had made things like Footballers' Wives. Went, oh, great, he'll have a gun, he brings a gun into school, and he points it at people, and then they play a Russian roulette. And I went, oh, it's a revolver then, because otherwise it's going to be a really short game of Russian roulette. And I kept saying, this is pre-Watershed. Are the BBC okay with this? Yeah, write it, it'll be fine. Long story short, the BBC were not happy with that. And the note, they were very strict. They came back. The gun could only be seen 3 times. No one could be injured with the gun. It must never be pointed directly at anybody under the age of 18, which is difficult in a school. So we end up, we had to compromise. But that's the reality. You get it on every show, which is, we can go this far, we have to pull it back. And often it's not just Ofcom or Ed Paul that are worried. Sometimes you'll get pushback from actors. I don't want to do this. I feel uncomfortable doing this. And you have to listen to that. So, yeah it's always a negotiation.
But presumably it's something that you kind of take on board as you go through. And the longer you do this, the more you learn. You mentioned Robin Hood, like a very kind of renowned historical character. Did you have to go and do some kind of historical research on Robin Hood? Now,
this was the BBC Robin Hood that really was not in any way historically accurate. I mean, he's a myth anyway, but not in any way historically accurate. So our historical research was, nobody says okay, because that was brought over with the GIs in the 1940s. Nobody can read really, because it's medieval England, and the biggest problem was getting the gang to say, we'll meet at, because nobody had a watch, it was, we'll meet at noon. It was always at noon. So yeah, we didn't do a massive amount of research on that show, because it was more a fantasy show than a historical show. But I've worked on, for example, Call the Midwife. The research on that show, both historical and medical, is meticulous. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, is that set in the 50s and then 60s?
It started in the 50s. They're into the 60s now. So the episode, they give you a month and the year. So it was November 1964, my episode. So you put something that's real in it to anchor the episode. So for me, it was the Tokyo Olympics. So they got footage of the Tokyo Olympics. They had the nuns watching the Olympics on their little telly in the front room. But when you go to the script editor's room, there's a bank of contemporary midwifery books, nursing guides, all the rest of it, and they go through it and go, the advice at the time was this, even though we don't do it like that, or how gas and air worked, what state the NHS was in at the time, all that kind of stuff. So you get reams and reams of very, very careful research.
You mentioned earlier on about Fat Friends not being a crime show and being very popular. Why are crime shows, and there are loads of them, and I love a good crime show. Why are crime shows so popular?
I think it's our first suggestion. They have very satisfying endings for the most part. So, the bad man gets put in the back of the police car and he's driven away. If it's an American show, the bad man gets shot to death, but that's politically problematic. You can, within the hour or within the 6 hours or within the 45 minutes, if it's an ITV drama, solve the case. It's the same for medical drama, that you can get to the cure, you can save the life, you can do the emergency surgery, all that kind of thing. It is a satisfying life and death situation in which you can solve. Also, it's a great level. Everyone in their life will experience some kind of crime. Everybody in their life will experience some kind of medical problem. So the idea of an A&E in this country is that, literally the Duke of Edinburgh can come through the door, as he has this week, of an NHS hospital, or a bloke who sleeps on the streets can walk through the door. So the breadth of story you can tell in crime and medical is so enormous that we'll never get tired of it. Cops and docs will always be at the heart of what we do.
Cops and docs, yeah, I like it. Now, actors, right? A lot of my students are actors and want to pursue acting. Tell us about some of your experiences working. If you're on set, if you're on the shoot rather, what's it like working with actors?
For the most part, the stories of excess and prima donnas are exaggerated. I've worked with a couple of absolute arseholes, and there's no doubt about it, and I will never work with them again. For the most part, most TV actors are enormously professional, because the reality of TV acting is really long days, a lot of boring sitting around. There is zero glamour in television acting, especially soap. You are a workhorse on those shows, and yeah, you get recognised in Asda and all of that kind of thing, but you are earning your keep, particularly on the continuing drama series. So actors are great, and often a really great actor will bring something to your script that you never saw in it. You'll take the credit for it, but often you'll hear a reading of a line or a scene and they'll have made a choice of how high they're going on the emotion, how low they're going, whether they throw the line away, that you go, wow, that was really the choice, the perfect thing to do. So a great actor will make your script absolutely sing. A terrible actor will not, but they don't last long. Terrible actors. So there's very few of them coming up through the ranks.
Talking about taking the credit, most of the shows that you've worked on, the general public will know the actors, right? And the majority of the public don't really care who wrote it, don't really care who directed it. Does that kind of get to you a bit?
Only when the superstar writers are being platformed. I think every female writer was very frustrated, and I know she was frustrated as well with the cult of Phoebe Waller-Bridge for a while, and the narrative that it was an overnight success, knowing that the work that she put into getting her career going, that Fleabag had been a stage show before it had become a TV show, that she as an actor she'd struggled to get satisfying parts because she was a attractive young woman. All of that kind of stuff. So that's frustrating when the narrative about writing is that it's easy, you get picked overnight, that your script is a lottery ticket and she just happened to have a winning lottery ticket, because 90% of the work that writers do is not listed on IMDb. It's the development work, the going to meetings, the selling your ideas, the rejection after rejection after rejection that comes with being a writer. So if a writer gets a platform, fantastic. You know, I have much love for the big names. So the names that you'll know: Russell T Davies, lovely man, Sally Wainwright, just a towering talent. Jed Mercurio deserves everything he gets. And Phoebe Waller-Bridge as well, I'd say. She's up there, enormously talented. She has a magic touch, there's no doubt about it. But there are lots of other writers who are putting that magic touch on your shows without even realising. And the workhorses are the soap writers, the CDS writers. They come up with new ideas week after week after week after week. It is a sausage factory turning those shows out, and they do it with passion and love. And I think they're not recognised as much as they should be.
You mentioned Phoebe Waller-Bridge. You wrote a very interesting piece for The Guardian over a year ago. You said, and it is a quote from it, said, "Yes, women wrote Fleabag and Derry Girls, but men still dominate TV." And you also say in that article that, quote, "only 14% of primetime TV was written by women, and that comedy has a particularly hostile environment for female writers." Why do you think why is that?
So the Writers Guild did a piece of research in 2018.
Because you are the chair of the Writers Guild, right?
Chair of the trade union for writers. So we did some research in 2018 looking into just the reality of commissions for women. And what we discovered is at what is considered the entry level of television work, children's television, soap, it's about a 50-50 split. But as you go up the ladder of your career, the drop off is extraordinary. And when we commissioned that research, we knew it was bad. We didn't think it was that bad. It's even worse in film. Even though films written by women in this country do better financially and critically, and we had the metric to measure that, it's still only something like 16% of British cinema is written by women. So it was enormously frustrating. And it's exactly what I was saying about Phoebe, that when Fleabag came around, she was so platformed, and so was Lisa, who wrote Derry Girls, that the narrative that was coming back was, oh, we've solved the woman problem. We've got women all over the place. I mean, literally, I was interviewed on Woman's Hour, and the interviewer said, but, you know, there's Sally Wainwright and Kay Mellor. I'm like, yeah. And then here's a huge list of all the men who are getting that prime time slot. So it's enormously frustrating. Obviously, now that narrative has also moved on, we're looking at Black and Asian writers. Asian writers in the last set of statistics from Project Diamond, which is the quality monitoring scheme that the BBC, ITV and Channel 4 have signed up to, the level of Southeast Asian writers working in this country is so low that they don't register on the statistics. And that's appalling. For Black writers, and the frustration for Black writers is then you get someone like Steve McQueen or Michaela Cole. Again, platform. We've solved it. There are Black programs on television. Oh, look, there's a Black person on that Daz advert. So it's all solved. When we look at the statistics, we know that's not true, that the representation is not true. And also, it's about who's at the top, who's making the decision. There's only one Black drama commissioner at the moment. That's not good enough. So
you've done a lot of work for the BBC, and talking about diversity there. Is the kind of spoof documentary W1A kind of based on reality?
Oh, I'd love to say it's not, but God, I think everybody who works in television watched that and went, there's a scene in the second series where someone in the drama department says, oh, this episode of this show that you're writing, it's too long. And he goes, like, you've got two scripts stuck together there. And I've literally had that happen to me. This script is very long. It's like, it's 2 episodes. So it's, yeah. Look, the reality is, like every institution in this country, it is dominated by Oxbridge graduates whose mummy and daddy worked in the industry and gave them the leg up, gave them those 2 months of free work experience and funded them through it. it is changing far too slowly. The stupid thing about the BBC is they know it, and they're embarrassed about it, and they're ashamed, and every scheme they put in place doesn't work. We need to have a really robust and honest discussion about whether, every time I see now diversity scheme, my heart sinks, because they don't work. They're just pointless and a waste of money, and they often, and as we know, they often make the people who are on them feel othered and singled out. So we need to have a really strong discussion about, look, we're just going to have to sack some white people and put some black and female women in those spaces. You know, some people are going to have to stand aside and let other people come up the ladder. I don't know how fast that's going to happen. I mean, and the BBC is struggling at the moment. Anyway, so it always feels a bit bad giving the BBC a kick in, because the Tories are doing that for us.
They certainly are. I've got a couple of a lot of the students are actors, as I mentioned. So I've got a couple of questions that are from acting students. Rachel, are you there? Rachel has got quite an interesting question for you, actually. Are you there, Rachel?
I'm here.
Here we are. Over you go.
Hi, Lisa. Just wanted to ask, have you ever been approached by practitioners or performers to write and collaborate at all?
Yeah, in theatre, so I'm part of a, God, it sounds so wanky, but I am part of a feminist theatre collective in Leeds, and that was an approach that was made to me by some female actors who wanted to work on a show that we called Unsung, that was about unsung women in history. And we had such a good time that we're continuing to work together. So we're writing something about female health that will hopefully, if the pandemic allowing, will go on tour next year. That's quite a small show, so that it's scalable and tourable, depending on you know, what the situation is in the theatres. And then we're working on a big show for the Leeds Cultural Festival in 2023 that will have, well, it depends whether our producer can get the money, a cast of thousands if we can. Not really, but it'll be about roller derby. So we'll have a community cast of people who can skate, and a very diverse cast of actors who will do movement and stuff like that about women's sport. So yeah, and I think if you time it right as an actor, approaching a writer can be a really good experience. It's definitely a two-way street and a very steep learning curve. So working with Unsung Collective, because there's a producer, a director, and then a gang of actors. I must admit, the first time they said, "Oh, we'll have a week of research and development," I was like, "Can I not just write it? Because that's what you do in television. Just here's the story, go away and write it." But it was enormously rewarding and fantastic. And in fact, last week we were in the workshop week for roller derby, and we did a day with a movement director and choreographer, and that was the day I was going to bunk off. No, I don't. That sounds like PE. I'm not interested. I'm really glad I stayed. It taught me so much about physical language and that kind of thing. And the choreographer I'm working with is brilliant and didn't make me do sit-ups or anything like that. So I was very happy about that. So yeah, I do that, and I think practitioners should always reach out to each other and find your gang that you want to work with. You see it a lot in comedy, the same people who come back together time and you often do solo projects, but come back together. I mean, it started with the Pythons and the Goons, but now, you know, you see people who when they collaborate, you think, fantastic, this is good stuff. So you get to know each other's language as well, and it makes collaborative working a lot easier. So yes, I'm all for collaboration.
Can you, Rachel, can you roller skate?
Yeah, I like ice skating too, yeah. I'm actually one of those choreography people, Lisa, so don't panic.
Oh,
I would never be mean either.
Hats off to you. I have new respect.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much, that's great.
That's a great question, Rachel. Kenneth's got another actor-based question. Kenneth, are you there with your question for Lisa? Here he comes.
Yeah. When writing for certain when writing for certain characters, do you ever like ask an actor for feedback, how they feel a character might behave in certain situations or develop further?
I don't seek them out to ask it, and I think that probably is the one area of tension in our industry, that between you do create the characters. You know, the writer and the actor do create the characters, but the writer has such an overview of what's happening, not just in the episode that you're working on, but then the series onwards. So sometimes you will get notes from actors and you think you don't understand because this will pay off 3 episodes down the road. You have to be respectful in that conversation and say, you know, and explain you've not read the script of episode 7, so you don't know, but this is coming, so it's important that he or she says this and or acts like this in episode 2. So I don't seek it out, but often they seek me out to give their opinion. So on Discovery Witches, obviously Matthew Goode is a very big name actor. He's on Hollywood stuff. He has really strong opinions about his character on that show, and you know, he's actually been on the show longer than me. So we've had a few conversations usually about lines or entry points into the scene that he doesn't feel comfortable with. And sometimes you'll get an actor coming back, and it's the constant discussion, which is they begin to feel very protective of their character because they're living inside them, they understand them. So when you get a character to do something truly awful or transgressive, the first thing that happens is the actor gets in touch and go, well, I just don't believe my character would do this. And it's like, he does, because it's on the page. Look, I've just written it. But it's often because they've become so subsumed in their character that they're concerned how the public will react to them doing those terrible things. So often I say, look, he's doing a terrible thing in this episode, but we'll get him to do something nice in the next one, or we will redeem it, because most drama is about redemption. So sometimes you have to really go there with a character to bring him back.
Thank you for that, Kenneth. Presumably, though, it depends on the actor. Some might need a bit more ego massaging than others, and
I think that is fair to say, yes. And also, if someone's been on a show a really long time, they do know their characters. So, for example, John on Midsummer Murders, he's lived in that character. He's seen many writers come and go. So you'd be a fool not to listen to them when they come with a concern. So on the high end shows, not at the moment, obviously, because of the pandemic, but you tend to have a couple of days before the shooting a big read through where you read through the script like it's a radio play around the table. And that is the actor's opportunity to say, I'm not comfortable with this, or sometimes it can be as simple as, can I say this at the top of the line, all the rest of it. And there are occasions, so I don't think it's any secret that New Tricks, a show I worked on for a really long time, I was on there for 9 years. The actors were absolute raging egomaniacs by the end of that show.
but they're all very, very established. They've all been around the block many, many times.
Exactly. But it got to the so here's the story, and I shouldn't really say it because I'm being recorded, but we stopped having read-throughs because they didn't like them. So they thought they were reading first drafts of scripts, they weren't, they were reading fourth drafts, and they'd give us our input. And they were picking over an investigation of an episode in an episode I'd written, and going, well, why didn't they just get him DNA tested? Because by this point they all believed they were police officers. And I went, because we'd solved the case in the first 5 minutes and they'd have to extend the news at 10, and stormed out of the room. It's the only time I've stormed out of a script meeting. Calmed down a bit, came back in. But yeah, it was. But it's all from a place of love and because they care about the show. But yeah, sometimes it is like banging your head against a brick wall, to be quite honest.
It's an age thing, isn't it? I the older I get, the more grumpy I get. thing is, one of the people that I've worked in my career for a long time is 10 years older than me, and as I see him get more grumpy, I make a note not to get that grumpy. Be grumpy, but not take it out on others, is what I say. But now another good question, actually. Melissa, are you there, Melissa? Melissa's got a great question. I was going to ask a version of this, but I'll let Melissa ask it. Hi, Melissa.
Hello.
Hi, Melissa.
Hello. I was just wondering if you sort of get, when you're writing scripts, if you get any sort of writer's block, or you get like when you're midway through a script, just sort of, I guess, writer's block, and how you might sort of solve that, or how you sort of get through it.
Sure. So it's one of the big fears, I think, of every writer's block, but actually I don't believe that writer's block, the idea that you one day sit at your desk and there's not a word in your head and it won't come out the end of your fingers, exists. What does exist is a lack of preparation, and that's where writer's block often comes from. So famously, writers hate writing treatments, breakdowns, outlines, whatever you call them, which is, you know, we just want to write the script. But if you don't put that work in, if you don't do the scene plans, don't do the treatments, if you don't break down your story, there will be a point that you are writing that script or you will grind to a halt. And it's like being in quick drying cement, that as you're typing away, there's a little voice in your head going, you don't know what happens next, and you don't know how to get into this scene, and you don't know how to vocalize, get your characters to vocalize what you need them to vocalize. And then it does feel like you are blocked. The reality is that you need to go away and not look at the script, look at something else. And let your mind sort out the problems that you've created for yourself. And it can be as small as, you know, I've sat there staring at a line of dialogue going, this is not right, I need it to say something else, and if I stare at it, I won't solve it. If I get up, go downstairs, make a cup of coffee, I never get as far as the kettle. I get halfway down the stairs and go, oh, it's this. It's putting your brain in a different state so that you can allow, you know, your amazing synapses at the back of your head to solve it. But if you're trying to do it with the front of your head, you know, the more you stare at it, it won't get solved. So I often say to writers, if you are having a day where you think, I cannot get a line on this page, sack it off, go somewhere else, go for a walk, do the washing up, take the dog for a walk, whatever it takes to not be staring at your screen, because the screen or the blank page is the least creative environment to be in. So writer's block for me is actually it's always temporary. You do hear apocryphal tales of people who one day sit down, can't write, and never write again. But I have a mortgage to pay, so I don't have time to indulge that.
Yeah. How's that, Melissa?
Yeah, that's really, thank you for that. It was, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, but you're right. Inspiration comes from lots of different places. Where do you get your inspiration from, Lisa? If you
all over the place. So the advice I give to new writers, it's been really difficult in lockdown because you know, often it is an overheard snatch of conversation in a coffee shop. Remember them? All those kind of, you know, places where you don't realize your brain is tuned in and you're picking things up. So in this odd time until we can get back to normal, I watch the news. I'm a bit of a news junkie, but it's not just the big stories. So today it's whatever Nicola Sturgeon's saying as we talk now, but it's the little stories and these. I love regional news. I love Look North, Calendar, which is in our region. I love the Yorkshire Evening Post. It's the tiny little stories that are a good bouncing off point. So stories don't present themselves fully formed. It's often one of my projects that I love, and one day I'll get it away. Came off. I overheard a bit on Radio 4 about Churchill never put fish and chips on the ration during the Second World War because he said it'd be such an enormous blow to our morale, because it's such a British thing, is fish and chips, even though the British didn't invent fish and chips, the Portuguese or possibly the Jews did, etc., but that's another argument to have for another time. And that's just that fab fact sparked off an idea for a film, which then turned into an idea for a series, and one day I'll get it made because I love it. But that, looking for that spark and letting your brain do that. So where was he getting the potatoes from? What about the fish? And then expanding the world. So every idea starts off on this, a pen and paper, and I do weird mind maps where I go, oh, a line off from there. What about this? Lots of question marks all over the page before I can get to the point where it becomes a fully formed narrative. So giving yourself time to meander and dream and daydream, I think, is a really important part of creativity.
Miles, I think Lisa might have answered your question there, but Miles, do you want to ask your question anyway? Are you there, Miles?
Oh, sure, yeah. I was gonna, you did answer it, yeah. I was gonna ask what's your like process when you're creating like a new piece or something you worked on, but I can check, like, what advice would you give someone who's like trying to create themselves, like what are some good focal points to like focus on when creating?
So think about the world that your idea is set in. It will be, you know, the realms of what's on the screen. If you can, in your mind, have that world go beyond that. So think about, you know, the jobs that your characters are doing, who they interact with. You know, if this is a period piece, make sure you do your research. You won't use it all, but it will inform the reality of the piece. Read around it. Don't be ashamed to watch shows that have tackled that world before and think about how you can do it differently, what you like and don't like about those shows or that play or that film. So yeah, broaden your horizons wide enough so that when you bring it into the box, the screen, you have concentrated it down to the best, the most interesting stuff. It's more time consuming developing new ideas than we ever give ourselves credit for. I don't know a writer in this world who hasn't set. In fact, I'm looking at my planner for this week. I'm going to finish a treatment I'm writing today. No, I'm not. It's going to get done tomorrow. Because we kid ourselves that we can just bash away, but you need the time to stare out the window or go on Twitter or reorganize your Pinterest page. That all looks like procrastination, but actually you're thinking it through. So for roller derby, God, we spent 2 days just watch. We watched Whip It, which is the film that lots of women say they watched and then they got into roller derby. We watched documentaries about it. We got some women in who do roller derby, taught them through. We won't use everything, but we've absorbed it now. We understand the world. We understand the aesthetic of the world. We understand the kind of characters that are in that world. It's really important to get to the point with your characters where if someone said to you, "What do you eat for breakfast?" you'd say Cheerios, and it, without even thinking about it, because you know that world and your characters so intimately. So give yourself the time to develop things. I think is the most important thing.
How's that, Miles?
Thank you. That's awesome. Thank you very much.
On the subject of your roller derby, when is that set? Is it contemporary or historical?
It's contemporary because it's such an extraordinary spot. It's so inclusive. So the idea is to look at the inclusivity of women's sport, who's been excluded in other sports, but this is a sport where it doesn't matter whether you're big, small, tall, trans, NB, whatever, you are involved in it.
Do you get? I mean, I'm asking for. You understand why I'm asking this next question? Do you ever get involved in soundtrack to any of the stuff you write?
You were often, so particularly the show I've just been worked on, most of them start with some sort of music sequence. So I must admit, I am not as cool as you, Graeme, when it comes to television. My musical taste to music, my musical taste sort of stagnated around the Bon Jovi era. I do love my soft rock, 70s metal, that kind of thing. So my suggestions, so in the script I always put suggested track, and they never use my suggested track, ever. But on roller derby, we've got a soundtrack that we will be using.
Excellent.
I will force it through.
Good.
It's some writers make a Spotify playlist that themes their work and they have it on while they're writing.
Okay. Right, now got a question from Hannah. Now Hannah is an animator, right? So are you there, Hannah? Let's have your question for Lisa.
Yeah, I'm an animator, so I don't really understand the world of script writing, but we've been given the task to write a script for our course. And I was just wondering, because the topic I'm hitting on is quite a serious topic, how do you create a script that's not going to offend the people about it? And how do you create it, though, while still talking about the serious topic in hand?
So 2 things there. First of all, nobody can create a script that doesn't offend someone. There's always a complaint about it. You have to tell your truth, and that's the thing. But think about your audience. So I don't want to say, because I know a lot of animation is for adult audiences, but if, for example, it's for a younger audience, think about them. Don't think about their parents watching it over their shoulder, and think about their sensibilities, what is damaging and what is useful for them to know, how you can sometimes sugar that pill so they're getting the information they need without being frightened or upset or traumatized. But offense, oh my god, literally everything I've ever written, someone has found some kind of offence in it. Even bloody All Creatures Great and Small, people got the knickers in the twist over that. So don't write it with, you know, Mary White. That's a very dated reference, but Mary Whitehouse or Piers Morgan or whoever is setting themselves up as the arbiters of taste at the moment, sat on your shoulder. Write what is true for you. And then put, you know, maybe write the balls out, you know, brass tacks version of it, and then think that's too far, I'm going to pull it back. That's too far, I can pull it back. Oh, do we need to see this? And you see it a lot in horror movies and things like that, which is often it's much more effective to look away from something that's terrifying or upsetting. And particularly, you know, massive narrative of the last few years has been because of the Me Too movement. Do we need to see the sexual assault? Is it better to hear it from the victim and hear their side of the story instead of just putting the male gaze character on them? So have a think about, do I need to show it in absolutely its gory detail, or sometimes can I just hear about it? Exposition can be a very useful tool in that thing. But I hope that's helpful, Hannah.
Yeah,
That's helped a lot, that has, yeah.
Yeah, good question, that. Now, you presumably work for yourself, yeah? You're a freelancer. Any tips and advice for someone? Because whether you're going to be an actor, screenwriter, producer, director, 99% chance you'll be a freelancer. Any tips and advice for working for yourself?
Absolutely. So it's not, I mean, particularly over the last 18 months, it's not easy being a freelancer. What I would say is be informed about tax, about what your rights are, all that kind of thing. Join your union. Of course, I would say that. I'm a chair of a union, but it is important because they will have that advice. They will discuss contracts. For example, the Writers Guild, if you are a member, even if you're just a candidate member, just waiting for your full membership, we will vet your contracts for you and make sure you're not getting ripped off. So make sure you don't sign anything without reading it through. Make sure you're not signing your rights away on anything, and if in doubt, if you're an actor, go to Equity. If you're a writer, come to us at the Guild. If you're a musician, go to the Musicians Union and talk things through. The other thing I would say is be prepared for things to take a lot longer than you think you are. When I said there's no such thing as an overnight success, it's true. So building some resilience, which means don't, you know, have enough money to cover your rent and your basics without getting the next job. Never, you know, if the last year has taught us anything, never spend money before it's in your bank. Be aware that nobody's career is a straight line. So mentally prepare yourself for there will be quiet times. Have some mechanisms in place, whether it's a project of your own you're working on. And actually, you know, as much as I take the mick out of actors, seeing actors over the last 12 months put themselves out there, rework their show reels, do monologues for social media, put things together has been extraordinary. People do endure, but make sure that everything is tip-top in terms of your headshots, your show reels. For writers, make sure you've got a couple of scripts that you can send out as reading examples. Don't write them for production, write them to show what you can do, but just be prepared that even, you know, I've got a 20-year career. It's not been me jumping from job to job, even though it looks like that on my CV. There have been 6 months where I'm thinking it's over. Nobody's interested in me. I can't get arrested. But then I work on my own stuff in that downtime. Now I'm in the enormously privileged position of having so much work that I can't get my development work done because I haven't got the time. So just prepare yourself and don't expect, you know, to go from a bit part in Emmerdale to getting the call for the next Marvel movie, because you know, you're not idiots, you know it won't work like that.
Absolutely sound advice there, Lisa. You mentioned Marvel. Over your left shoulder, I can see Tony Stark as Iron Man.
You see Iron Man's leg, and there's Thor there.
Exactly.
The full-size Thor's in the kitchen.
Excellent. Excellent. Bit of a Marvel fan, are we?
Absolutely obsessive. totally and utterly obsessed. It is the most satisfying, because I was a comics fan before they started making the universe, the cinematic universe. I love how it has been a masterclass in television, how they've worked things around, how they've built the narrative, and even though they're standalone films, they're like their episodes in a really great TV series. So
Would you like to write a Marvel?
oh my God, yes, that's the dream. That's the I get the phone call from Kevin Feige saying, "Do you want to have a crack on Ms. Marvel or one of the minor characters?" That would be amazing.
I mean, have you made that approach? Have you put that out there?
Well,
you have now. You have now.
Yeah, I have now. I've manifested it for the universe, so I'm just staring at the phone now. Any minute.
Okay. Have you turned anything down?
Yeah, again, privileged position to be in. I took a break from crime for a while. Midsummer was a really, really tough show to work on. It partly because I wasn't 100% sold on it as a viewer. I'd not really watched it before I came on the show, which was possibly a mistake. So I did sort of do a weekend of box setting it. But it was very middle class crime, and it wasn't a comfortable world to be in, and they're really, really tough tracks. They're 2 hours long, so you're writing a movie basically. So I took a long break from crime to recharge my batteries and write other things, and it was a good move. I had a sort of a little sort of 6-month hiatus where I was turning down episodes of various crime shows, but then got Call the Midwife and Ackley Bridge, which I loved, and that was great because it was only a 40-minute drive to the studio to watch that big film because it was down the road in Halifax, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. I'm now coming back to crime because I'm being asked to pitch original crime ideas. So, but taking that break was a really good idea.
Great. Listen, this has been fantastic. What would you tell? I always ask all my guests this: what would you, if you could go back in time, what would you tell your younger self, your comprehensive schoolgirl self?
That you're not daft to want to pursue this. There's always a little voice, the imposter syndrome, saying this is not for the likes of you. I would maybe tell that voice to shut up a bit more, but it's still with me today. I don't think there's anybody in this industry who doesn't think what a ridiculous thing to do for a living. Why don't you get a proper job that actually helps people? But I think, again, the last 12 months have proved that artistic content has been very important to the world.
Brilliant. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. That's been fascinating. Lots of great tips and advice for our students as well. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot, guys.